and welcome to a special edition of That Saturday Show. I'm Jim Harvey, your host. We're honored to have with us for today's presentation three and hopefully four esteemed members of the faculty and staff at the University of New Mexico. We are framing this as a discussion called Blacks in Leadership at UNM.
Hello and welcome to Good News News. I'm your correspondent, Sonia, and I'm Gugu for Good News. Welcome to Black History Month 2022. Our first good news story is about a young girl's history that is helping her create a new future. Let's take a look, shall we?
Lanaya Flowers has talent, and it's in the family. Her grandmother was an artist.
When she passed, she had a will and all her art stuff came to me. It was a lot. It was probably enough art stuff to last the whole lifetime.
Paint, brushes, clay, glue, scissors. Grandma could create anything. And she taught Lanaya at a young age that she could too.
So she'll give us like cardboard boxes and stuff, have us cut it out and make fake food to play kitchen and stuff. And she always is showing us how to make things out of nothing.
The school created an exhibit to showcase her work. Traci Baddist is her principal.
Oh my God, she is amazing. She's an amazing young lady.
Lanaya is also a member of Girls Inc. She is not just an artist. She is strong, smart, and bold.
When we walk around here, we know we're strong because we can use our voices, we can communicate with each other. We know we're smart because you can be smart in your own way. You don't have to be intellectually smart. You don't have to be good at math. You don't have to be good at reading. You can be smart just by knowing what's going on around you. And then bold, we're here to make a statement. We're here to show everybody who we are, what we can do, and how we can impact others around us.
Now, isn't that good news? Bravo, I can't wait to see what else she creates. Well, back in the day, I insulted an artist for his bad painting. But I guess it was okay, because he just brushed it off. I know, that was good. Well, let's check in with our favorite sassy grandmother, Little Big Mama. What do you have in store for us today, lady?
Hi, Hassani. I have a question for your viewers today. Why are artists so good at self-control? Because they know where to draw the line. Now, I want to tell you quickly about my friend Gertrude. She came up to me this morning and said, "Girl, I'm getting married tomorrow to one of the top producing real estate agents in the city. He's so charming. Check out the diamond engagement ring he sold me. Bye, baby."
Little Big Mama, my brother-in-law approached my sister at the club and he asked her, "Hey girl, are you a mortgage? Because you sure do have my interest." The best way to turn a frown upside down is to get Gugu for good news. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi, and I'll see you right here next time on That Saturday Show with more You Got It, good news.
The Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice has been serving the communities of Albuquerque for nearly 40 years. Peace and justice are the motivators for the work we do, in concert with dozens of other organizations and committees here and around the country. But we can't do it without your help. We need you. Get in touch at www.abqpeaceandjustice.org or call us at 505-268-9557. Good evening and welcome to a special edition of That Saturday Show. I'm Jim Harvey, your host. And we are honored to have with us for today's presentation three and hopefully four esteemed members of the faculty and staff at the University of New Mexico. We are framing this as a discussion called Blacks in Leadership at UNM. And with us today for this discussion, we have Dr. Traci Collins, who is the Dean for the College of Population Health, Dr. Jamaal Martin, who is faculty for Africana Studies and the Associate Vice Chancellor for African American Health in the Office of Community Health, and Dr. Kirsten Buick. And Dr. Buick, you're the first one that we haven't met before, but you have such an exciting role, and I hope to hear a lot from you. Dr. Buick is professor of art history, and for an art collector, that sets me up for sincere interest there. She's the director of Africana Studies and the associate dean of equity and excellence in the College of Fine Arts. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. Just those titles alone tell me that you all stay busy, but I'm glad that you're here. And to just get this discussion rolling, let me just lead off with a question, and that is, in the roles that you play and your relationships with the University of New Mexico, what are your experiences like, particularly when it comes to the Black experience, Black students, and you all as being Black faculty and staff members there?
And I'm happy to start if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yes, so it's really great to be here. It's great to be among these wonderful panelists as well. So for me, as Dean for the College of Population Health, I'm also a physician and a researcher. And what I have observed is I'm at the table with the executive leadership of Health Sciences Center, and that is wonderful. But I'm the only person of color who's a dean on the Health Sciences Center side. Now we have vice presidents, but we don't have representation other than myself. And the one thing I can say as a Black woman, when we begin to talk about the issues in various communities throughout the state, the thing that I hear that I don't like hearing is that African Americans, Blacks only make up 2 to 3% of the state's population. Therefore, we really shouldn't spend too much time talking about them. Nothing can be farther from the truth, and it's really inappropriate. What we have is a multicultural state. It's largely Latinx, Hispanic. There's a large proportion of indigenous communities, but there are also other communities, and there are African Americans, there are Asian Americans, and we all matter. So for me, when I'm thinking about recruiting students, faculty, when I'm thinking about the research I'm doing, our educational offerings, I want to make sure that I'm thinking about everyone and not just 1 or 2 groups in the state. And so I've had to be a voice to say, make sure we're inclusive and we're really serious about being inclusive, and that we understand what equity and inclusion mean, and not just put a little rubber stamp on it and move on. So I just feel like University of New Mexico is a great academic institution, but we've got work to do. And I'll stop there.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, Dr. Collins, because when I talk about it, I always want to push back on the notion that this is a tricultural state, and also say that this is, yes, a multicultural state. And when it comes to the number of African Americans here, my other pushback is, the number may sound small, but our footprint is significantly large, and it therefore cannot be ignored. So thank you for that. Yeah. Dr. Buick.
Thank you for having me. And like Traci, like Dean Collins, I just want to say what an honor it is to be among all of you. And I just wanted to ask Dr. Dean Collins, how many years have you been here?
I have been here since 2019, so it's only 3 years, or almost 3. So it's been kind of an interesting trajectory coming here, and then COVID and all the other activities that happened, but almost 3 years.
Okay, that's interesting. I've been here for 20 years. I have been here for 20 years. And when I interviewed for the position, it was actually the least racist interview I had, because I wrote my dissertation on a Black woman, Black in Ojibwe. And when I interviewed at East Coast institutions and at West Coast institutions, They questioned whether I could teach quote unquote American art because I'd written on an African and Ojibwe woman. And it had to do with how these institutions continue to conceptualize Black people, African diasporic people as not American and never American. And so that question didn't get asked here. And it's not that this place doesn't have issues and problems around race. It's just that they conceptualize themselves as American very differently than either the East Coast or the West Coast. And so settling here gave me a place to kind of exhale, right? To quote Terry McMillan, gave me a place to exhale. But growing up in a first generation college student, growing up with a mother who was a secretary for personnel, right? I knew that you can dismantle and put back together an institution from the inside. So for me, it's always been the long game. I was chairing searches my third year here while still an assistant professor. I joined every search committee I was asked to join, and I chaired and volunteered to chair searches that weren't necessarily geared around what I do or what I research, but I've been able in my department to build a faculty that is made up of people of color. Half of the people there are people of color. So it's the long game, always.
That means so much. That really does. It really does. Because what you're doing is you're reinstitutionalizing, you know, at essential levels and building in that kind of accountability where it matters. I'm really happy to hear you say that too. Dr. Martin?
Yes, very succinctly, I want to reiterate the comments made by my sisters about the honor of being on this panel with such illustrious characters. And since we are limited by time, I have to sort of rethink this format for a moment or so, because initially, you were talking about Black leadership, and that's an important concept to think about. But I'm looking at it from the frame that was initially proposed to us, this notion of dealing with systemic racism and oppression, and how it cannot be changed and must be dismantled and replaced. And so my thinking is still along those lines right now as I provide this bit of narrative. I like my sister, Dr. Buick. I came here as a doctoral student, and I came here as a public health scientist, practitioner, researcher with quite a bit of a background. And I finished up my degree, and I was told by a chair member that at one point, we cannot hire any more bright African students at this university because we don't know what to do with you. We don't know how to handle you. We don't know how to, react to you. And I thought, wow, this is nice to hear after I'm graduated in many ways. But something that Dr. Collins has said still rings true with this. And one of the reasons why I came to New Mexico also too, was because they had a very unique program, which I found out in the middle of the program that we were the last cohort to go through that doctoral training, and they were getting rid of the program, which I thought was a big mistake. But this issue of multiculturalism sort of brought me here. And little did I realize that we were still stuck in this mode of being a tricultural state. And so that has permitted some, really interesting challenges after coming from Hawaii for 20 years, where I was dealing with multiple cultures and ethnicities and languages and communications. I think that in my time here, while denied many opportunities to be placed at the Health Sciences Center, being in cancer research and infectious disease research and all kinds of things, I was fortunate enough to be asked to teach a couple of classes related to health out of Africana studies as an adjunct. And being there in that sense, I've sort of traversed this academic road, which I call academic sharecropping, throughout this. And I'm going to really turn that into a more interesting narrative when the time permits. But I think being in Africana studies has provided me with the strengths and the background to really sort of push forth this notion of epistemic disobedience and dealing with epistemic apartheid as it comes from the discipline of Africology in that sense. And I think my comment really about all this that I really want to say is that as I look at this notion, I think about these things, I've come to realize that higher education in America is Eurocentrism on anabolic steroids. And as I think about this roid rage that's going on and how it leads to many different types of things we can classify under the Diagnostic and Statistical, Manual for Mental Health, is antithetical to optimal human functioning. And so with this notion of leadership, the few of us who are there, and I am so glad to see my sisters right now. African-American women are really pushing the agenda. They have taken over because they outnumber the men on this campus, which is indicative of a larger issue, on this campus and in education across the Western world. The young African-American males are not getting an education or even going into higher education in many ways. And so rather than going about these battles with economic, regarding not economic, but academic schizophrenia, Africana Studies has been a lifesaver for me, at this university, because it's allowed me to take my health background and channel into understanding through Afrocentric lens the conditions and problems that beset so many of people of African descent. And I'm glad to try to take and provide some leadership for this, but there's still problems with that in many ways. And so, I think one of the things that, to paraphrase something that Collins said, is that there's an old quote from W.B. Du Bois that he gave to the graduating students in the 1930s. And in teaching at UNM in Africana Studies, I've learned a lot to pull from these ancestors. And this comment, he says, "Let there be no misunderstanding about this. There is no easygoing optimism. We are going to force ourselves in by organizing far-seeing efforts, by outthinking and outflanking the owners of the world today, who are too drunk with their own arrogance and power successfully to oppose us if we think, learn, and do." And that's one of the many things. The last part of that is what I've been trying to encourage the students to do, is to think, learn, and do, and how we overcome this and learn how to become intellectual warriors as they put forth their leadership in changing these disparate paradigms and issues that leads to so much of the excess deaths and suffering that we see within the community. So I say that because one of the things that I've really taken from this also too is recognizing that academics is health and health is academics. And education is the most robust predictor of health and well-being. So through programs like Africana Studies and certain other ethnic studies programs, we have the opportunity to try to change that narrative, to get away from this notion that there's only one way of looking at the world, and particularly through that lens of the people who corrupted it the most. And so I'm going to stop right there because I know that we're limited by time, but this is a fantastic opportunity to sort of gather our collective wits and skills and try to solve the problem of not being a problem.
Thank you so much for that. Anybody want to load on to that?
I appreciate the comments, and actually, I'm just sitting here thinking about them, and there's a lot in what you had to say, Dr. Martin, and I do appreciate it. It's the Eurocentrism, navigating that and not losing your mind, but recognizing it's there and just figuring out, how do I maintain my dignity, my sanity, and still be productive? That's a lot to take on every day when you get out of bed. So,
and I would just add, learning not to be addicted to the rage that induces.
mm-hmm.
My mother passed away a year ago, and there was something happening in the department that was making me lose my hair. And I was angry all the time. And then I said, wait a minute. I said, my mother taught me how to MacGyver racism in my sleep. So I calmed down and I handled it. And so we honor our ancestors by jettisoning rage and always taking the center. You never concede the center.
I arrived in Albuquerque 10 years ago. And, one of the first things I did when I got here was start this active search, looking for my people. And someone said to me, why, are you spending so much time trying to find Black folks here? I said, it's a lifelong commitment of mine, because growing up and going through all the levels of education I didn't find myself where I should have been able to find myself. And so any way or any opportunity that I could find to, in fact, get together with, and find a representation of Black people, I was going to do that. And that continues to be a commitment today. And yeah, like Eurocentric education, much to the detriment, of us, it creates PTSD, but how do you handle it, is the question. And so I think you really touched on that, Dr. Buick. We are now joined by Dr. Sonia Gibson Rankin, from the law school at University of New Mexico. Welcome, Dr. Rankin. How are you?
Doing well. Please forgive me. I was just doing a TV interview for a new case that just came up, so I apologize. But I feel much better to be here than anywhere else right now.
We're glad to have you, and we're just broaching the subject of the Black experience, through a UNM lens, as each of you see it individually. So if you want to just jump right in at this point, your timing is perfect.
Thank you. Good evening. Wonderful to see you all, colleagues. I started at the University of New Mexico in 2009 as an adjunct faculty. Dr. Sherry Burr, who was then the acting director of Africana Studies, had allowed me to teach the civil rights movement. And it was the most perfect way to gel and connect me into the New Mexico community, was to have this home through Africana Studies. And from there, I was afforded some wonderful opportunities under the leadership of Dr. Burr, then later Dean Alfred Mathewson, who was then the next acting director. And just to have that kind of community and sense, so that, my day was kind of great. I was at home with my Black family. I went to my Black church, and then I went to my job where it was filled with Black teachers and Black professors and Black staff and Black students. So I am really grateful to have had my start at UNM through Africana Studies. I was able to serve as a lecturer and then later senior lecturer through there for 9 years before transitioning to the law school. And from that point, I really worked to, there's this phrase I'm into. I looked for orange cars. I really love the color orange. And I've decided to look for orange cars everywhere I go. And that's what I do about Black people. I look for Black people. And I've discovered if I look for Black people, I will find Black people every single place. And so I've been the faculty advisor for the National Society of Black Engineers, UNM chapter. I'm now the faculty advisor for the Black Law Student Association. And I am also a former president of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association. And so I get this, I've created a space and an opportunity where I get to be surrounded by the people I love the very most.
It's such a valuable space in which to be. It really is. Yeah. All right. So continuing this discussion, I just, like I said, I want this to be a free-flowing discussion, and you all can just bounce off one another's comments, because that's the only way we're going to get smarter.
Let me jump in again, and it's good to see you, my friend Sonia. It's good to see you again here with us. I want to, expand upon something that Dr. Collins mentioned, and she chimed in on the comments that I made about Eurocentrism in education and how that's, the marker of so much of what we deal with. And Jim, you mentioned something like, PTSD, and there's also a phenomenon done by Black social workers called post-traumatic slave disorder or dysfunction. And so that's something we need to interrogate also too. But one of the most disturbing things that I've seen materialized during COVID-19 was this issue of epistemic apartheid, in the sense that the knowledge and ways of knowing that are produced by African-American scholars is really not addressed in ways that are proper and fitting for the work and time and effort that we put into it. It's not recognized because it's not from a Eurocentric perspective for the most part. And as we look at COVID-19 right now, we'll see that the scholarship of so many prominent African-American researchers and theorists is being ignored in many ways. And now that everyone has seen the sexualization, to make it sexy, of teaching anti-racism, and you find European-derived scholars or people who self-identify as white grabbing onto it like, it's manna from heaven, and all of a sudden everyone is an expert in it, and they read maybe one book possibly, when there's so many, the history of dealing with anti-racism, anti-Blackness is centuries old in this country from the work that we put forth. And so now when you find yourself sitting on committees or working with things, and this is across the country too, you find that the other is taking some of these aspects of this knowledge and moving forward themselves for promotions and other types of things, and negating the work that so many people of African descent have put into this. I'm trying to find nice ways of saying all of this, but it's become problematic in a sense. It's another sense of theft that's taking place also too.
Absolutely.
And ignoring, the work of the work that promotes scholars within academia and other places, such that when students come and enroll to any type of institution such as this one, they see those faculty members as prominent members of the community and the work that's being done, not placed on the margins. So it's something else to think about, which gets back to the theme that we talked about before about systemic racism and oppression. Can it be changed? And yes, we can create disruptive innovations and move towards the dismantling of certain structures, but it must be dismantled and replaced. There's no doubt about that in my mind. It can't be changed in that sense. And so we need to go back to some of the old ways of learning from the ancestors and say, let's create structures and universities and institutions to compete against it. Because that's the only way we're going to find real humanism.
Exactly.
Humanism.
Exactly.
If I could just add on to what Dr. Martin said, which is so very profound, what we've also discovered is that for many Black people on these committees are finding that they move from pet to threat. There's actually some interesting scholarship on it, where they are so excited that you come, whether it's because of your pigmentation or your cultural heritage, and the way that you tell them how you think. That's the fun part. You tell them how you think, you tell them what matters, they say that's wonderful. But then when it comes time to execute on that, this pet has turned into a threat. And they are interested in operating on the theoretical level of equality and justice until it comes time to actually execute it for the actual individual Black people in their path. Somehow there's this disconnect between the theory of equity versus being mindful of a person who's actually in their direct. But once there's a name attached, somehow we're back to bean counting and arguing. Maybe they're not actually quite up to snuff.
As the diversity officer for my college, what I'm finding is we require all of our new hires to provide a diversity statement and or a statement around community and how they'll engage the community. And so this is something that's required, right, from upper administration, from the upper levels of the college. But then when the faculty is hired, they are told, don't try it. Right? And it doesn't matter what color the faculty is. You have some really earnest young white faculty coming in, believing in community, believing in the communities in New Mexico, believing in diversity. Mm-hmm. And then they're made to have meetings, right? And then they're asked impossible things like maybe you should fundraise in order to facilitate your dream. And so once they're here, everything is done in the power structure to stymie them and turn those diversity statements, those community statements into empty gestures.
So what they're doing is they're diluting any potential for making it for bringing anything to the fore or making any real contributions, and when I hear people say maybe you should fundraise, in other words, just go over there and raise money because we don't value what you're doing, and if you're lucky enough to raise some money, then maybe you've got something to talk about, and then we'll take 30 or 40% of what you fundraise, and maybe you'll get something done. I've been there too many times. Yeah, it's amazing. It is, yeah.
So I'm wondering, and I love all these comments, but I want to go back to you, Dr. Martin. What does the disruptive innovation, what are the ideas that we need to be thinking about to move us beyond the current situation? Do you have any models of other people or what they're doing around this?
Well, a few years ago, Stanford University came out with a journal called the Journal of Innovations. and they really talked about this notion of disruptive innovations. And I think that, while there's no hard, in fact, science in terms of meta-analysis of some of the things that are going on, and one of the things that I argue in this is that we have to stop talking about this as a best practice, because it is not a best practice, because it is not really, we can use the notion of promising practices if we're going to be rigorous about the evaluation and research and things. And so I think that, as we talk about equality that was mentioned before, we have to look at it by breaking down the 3 stages of process, impact, and outcomes, within the hierarchy. To paraphrase again, and I'll get back to your question about models in a second, sense, but I've got this bug in my head now, so I got to get it out, because you both mentioned something about educating, and Dr. Buick mentioned this too. Universities have co-opted so much of this work, and they're more interested in commodification than anything else in that sense. And so we're talking about a system that's created to do exactly what it's been doing and won't change. So we have to decolonize that mindset also too. And I think sometimes while we think this has to take place, and this is going to get me in trouble with a lot of the people now who are against critical theory and other types of things, while critical theory is not really being taught in grades K through 12, we need to start incorporating some of these facets in our education to move towards more humanism. And I guess one of the models I can think about now that Jim will agree with me on is that I think the models that exist in strategic peace building education that exist. As we talk about strategic peace building education, we're talking about the promotion of issues that relate to fairness and justice and equity, and not just creating sameness, but also too using those sound principles for conflict transformation and not resolution, transforming those conflicts so that there is proper dialogue and not debate about what it means to be a fair and just human being, to practice human dignity. And so within strategic peace building education, we're borrowing those pedagogical tools, which were influenced by Martin Luther King in many ways also too, before it was picked up by European researchers, and pointing out that we're really talking about structural violence, not domestic violence, which that's important, and as war is also too, but we're talking about this notion that structural violence, because they're embedded in the political and economic organization of our social world, and they're violent because they cause injury to people. And so one of the models that I'm looking at now is that I'm moving away from social determinants of health to political determinants of health. Because, and I look at the models that put forth by Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston with the NAACP, and the models that they use to disengage and break down segregation in schools is a model that I think that can be used to dealing with health, because these are all health concerns when we think about them in many ways, as they relate to transportation, food insecurity, housing, the full 9 yards in that sense. So by looking at political determinants, that means that we have to get back to the essentials of saying that we have to talk about voting issues, and voting rights, and how important that is in a progressive democracy. Because if you don't have that, then we're not going to have these opportunities for these social structures to exist that bring about peace and harmony. The World Health Organization, in terms of health promotion and disease prevention, lists the #1 factor for health and well-being is peace. Not housing, not shelter, not clean water, not clean air, but peace. And so since Jim is operating that notion right now of coming from the Peace and Justice Center of Albuquerque, I think it's important for us to understand, what peace is and what it isn't. People, if you ask people to define peace, they can't define it, but I tell them it's the absence of peace that defines it. Then you know it when you don't see it. And so that's another pathway for us. When I was doubling as a faculty in Africana Studies, and I was the director for the Peace and Justice Studies program on campus, many African Americans would come to me and say, like, why are we talking about peace? And I'm just like, really? You don't think there's a need for peace? You don't understand what this really means and where we can go with this? And so the two are intimately linked. So there are a number of different models. And when you want to sit down with me again in another dialogue, we can certainly talk about that and brainstorm about that as we move forward that, because I believe in action-oriented research. This is not something that we should be doing that should be sitting on a shelf. We have to put it to use, because when we think about coming from a healthcare background before coming into academia and liberal arts and things, I often tell my colleagues, we have to deal with the suffering that people are going through. The work that we do in all of our factors, whether it's aesthetics and art and music and humanities, it has to be gauged towards something higher than that. And it's not just about producing, individual wealth. So yeah, let's talk about those models, and maybe Jim can get us on at another time, the four of us come together and talk about what that modeling would look like.
Yeah. Because Dr. Buick, Dr. Rankin, you guys, I'm sure you have thoughts as well. That would be great.
Oh yeah, yeah. I knew that this would lead to a part 2. And so I'm going to be doubling back to do just that. Let's set up a part 2 of this and hope your schedules will all permit you to come back again, because we've got about maybe 4 minutes left. And what I'd like to do is just a round robin to visions for significant change, and share what kinds of visions come to mind for you that represent significant change in the environment in which we live and in the environment in which you work.
Okay,
Dr. Rankin.
Okay, go ahead. You nominated Rankin.
So thank you for that, Dr. Harvey. What's standing out to me is this, the image of successful change is kind of these two terms that have been standing out to me. Do we have a sense that we are valued and that we belong from the places where we are? And that's something more concrete, right, than a person attempting to just fit in, right? What parts of me am I not sharing in the workplace because of fear of reprisal? So that is one issue. And the other part is, am I just a unicorn, right? Are you waiting to just trot me out for special moments and events, but that I know that there's fundamental things about me that you're arguing I'm good enough to fit in, but that me as part of a larger population is unacceptable. So I really think what would be the thing I'm after is a sense that people feel that they're included and that they are valued and that they belong in their space.
Thank you for that. Dr. Collins?
Yeah, so, you know, as a clinician researcher who's come up the ranks, and I remember when Institute of Medicine gave their report, all the craze was about addressing health disparities. And then we moved towards health equity. And now we're looking at anti-racism, critical race theory. What I've seen is that when there's money on the table, folks who represent the majority, they show up, they know how to get that money, and they're going to even look at the minority population, not include a minority investigator, but do that work. So what I want to see is that we get beyond our insecurities, that we open up our minds and our mouths to learn from each other, have positive confrontation where we can dialogue about what isn't working and what is, and let's begin to make change. Before I take my last breath on this earth, I really want to feel like we're moving in the right direction. And so that's what I hope for.
Great. Dr. Buick?
The only space that we have is the space that we make. And so I took on the directorship of Africana Studies to lead it to departmental status, because I want to make it a safe space and an excellent space and an amazing space and a refuge. And, you know, it's like I said before, you never concede the center. I learned my discipline inside and out, and I describe my first book as my hate letter to art history. You don't have to love the discipline you are in, but you have to know it so that you can take it apart.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you for that. Dr. Martin, bring us home.
I agree with all of my sisters there on many of these important points. And with the notion of creating not only a safe space, but I think it has to be a brave space. And for me, that's what Africana Studies and Africology as a discipline has always been, a brave space to say these things, you know, without feeling threatened in many ways. But I think for everyone, we have to stop overlooking the value of historical African culture and identity and how that brought about world civilization and what we can relearn from that in many ways. And so I think that's important because that allows us the opportunity to stop the psychological and cultural misorientation among people of African descent and when we go to that route. So it's another way of saying that, yes, we are valid and we don't have to prove ourselves by some of the unfair comparisons that have been made for 500 years as we continue to decolonize minds. And I think in one of my more radical stances right now, I have to quote two statements, one from Malcolm X and one from Steve Biko. Malcolm X once said that only a fool would let his enemy educate his children. And as I think about these issues of our health and well-being across the life course trajectory, you know, I have to look at this notion of education, what it is and what it is not, based upon things that Carter G. Woodson has said, But also, too, keep in mind something, Bantu Steve Biko once said before his martyrdom, and that is the strongest tool in the hands of the oppressor is the minds of the oppressed. And so when we roll with those facets, we have to honor, those who came before us, who led the way for undoing these notions, because quite frankly, the two things that matter most to African Americans or people of African descent have been freedom and literacy. Freedom and literacy are the two most important things that we have to unmind. And I thank God and my parents for allowing me to become literate at a very early age. And I think that's the thing that saved my life, really, in many ways. So I think that's what it is. And that's something that we have to help the communities understand also, too, as we do this. So there's more. I would like to continue these discussions with my colleagues as we share ideas across different platforms and integrate them in useful ways to come up with disruptive innovations and strategies that's going to lead us to more health and well-being along the spectrum of insanity that exists. So God bless you all.
Let's find some opportunities to get in some more good trouble as we, schedule a part 2 here. So thank you all, and I'll be in touch with you. And to the listeners and viewers out there, stay tuned because there's going to be a part 2. There's much more that we can cover here. My thanks to Dr. Kirsten Buick, Dr. Jamaal Martin, Dr. Sonia Gibson Rankin, and Dr. Traci Collins. And
it's Black History Month, Albuquerque, and that Saturday show is bringing you some insightful and exciting Black facts. Let's get started. Archie Williams, Olympic gold medalist, Air Force pilot, meteorologist. Archie Williams lived a full life with a numerous set of accomplishments. Born in Oakland, California, Williams attended San Mateo Junior College, where his coach, Tex Bird, noticed that his running style was more suited for a quarter mile than a 100-yard dash. Bird wanted Williams to go to Stanford, but Williams knew better because he just realized that going to Stanford would mean that he'd never get a scholarship. Why? Because he was white. So Williams opted for the University of California at Berkeley, and he enrolled there in 1935. While attending UC Berkeley, Williams focused on academics as well as track because he had high aspirations. He would earn a degree in mechanical engineering in 1939, but in the process, he became an adept 400-meter runner, setting a new world record of 46.1 seconds in 1936, and he won the gold medal in the 1936 Berlin Olympic Games for the same event. The 1936 Berlin Games, as many of you might know from your history if it hasn't been kept from you, was marred by the rise of Hitler and his attempt to promote Aryan superiority. Sound familiar? However, Jesse Owens, winning 4 gold medals, and the success of other African-American athletes debunked Hitler's ideology. And Williams is famous for saying Hitler wouldn't even shake his hand. Williams went on to become a fighter pilot in World War II and a Tuskegee Airman flight instructor. While training this elite fighting group, Williams studied to become a meteorologist, assisting the Tuskegee Airmen with potential weather conditions that could affect their missions. The life of Archie Williams is symbolized by achievement and service. Before retiring, Williams taught high school for 20 years. He was inducted into the California Athletic Hall of Fame and the USA Track and Field Hall of Fame. Archie Williams. This is That Saturday Show. We're celebrating Black History Month, and we're talking today about barbering. And our first guest is Mr. Jonathan Garcia, a student at ABU Barber School. And Jonathan, talk to us about what got you into this.
Absolutely. My name is Jonathan Garcia, and I was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My mother has a shop in Santa Fe that she's been running now for 45 years. Virginia Garcia salon, yeah, so she definitely got me into it at a young age, watching her, you know, work with all her clients, and I just kind of got into it. It was always a niche I had. So going throughout life, you know, I was in the service, I was in the Navy, and I did some teaching along the way, and I thought maybe now's the time for me to get into something that's in the blood, you know, with my mother's skills in barbering and cosmetology. So that's kind of what made me go this route.
That apple didn't fall far from the tree.
No, not at all, not at all.
Yeah. Well, you know, beauty salons, barbershops have historically been, you know, the social gathering spots for people.
Definitely.
You get there and you play catch up on what's going on, and you hear about all the problems, and you get all the good news as well. And I'm sure that's going on in your mom's shop.
Absolutely, definitely.
So what are your plans for once you finish here?
I'll be graduating April 15th, and my plan when I get out of here, God willing, will be to open up my own barber shop and, you know, follow in her footsteps and just bring the community together by coming in, getting those nice fresh fades and fresh haircuts, and, you know, making them feel good, basically, is what it's all about. So
fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Congratulations. I think that's wonderful.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for taking
Appreciate
some
it.
time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
Take
Good
care.
luck to you.
Thank you again.
All right. Continuing our conversation and talking about barbering and what motivates people to get into this work. And we're now talking with Esperanza. And welcome to That Saturday Show. And thank you for inviting us into your home.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us, what brought you into a career in barbering?
Well, if you would have told me 5 years ago, 10 years ago I'd be here at barber school, I don't think I probably would have laughed, because I don't think I would have seen myself here.
Okay.
My wife actually has been doing hair for the last 12 years. I was working for the state and for the county for the last 10 to 12 years. So I was vested with that and doing work like I was in the military, and I also worked for the jail.
All right.
So those style of work, those forms of work is always what I've done. It was starting to take kind of a toll on my body and my mentality and stuff like that. I always saw my wife cutting hair, and she always looked very fulfilled and very happy. And she had a lot of clients that were just very, very sweet to her. So she was always suggesting for me to try doing this career. So I opened up to it and signed up. I quit my job, and she's been supporting us while I'm doing this, and I actually love it. So I'm really excited for this new journey.
I think it's fantastic, and you're to be commended for that. So what are you going to do when you finish, when you graduate?
Me and my wife want to open our own spot in Santa Fe.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll be able to get that started soon.
People always want to look good.
Yep.
And they're going to beat a path to your door, I know, because you're going to develop that kind of reputation right away.
Yeah.
If you want to look good, you know, go to Esperanza's shop, right? That's fantastic.
Or feel good. We want the kind of want to shop with good energy, kind of like how the school, kind of like how the school does.
Yeah. So you all see, you know, regular clients in here as a part of your learning experience, don't you? So does this become like a hotbed of conversation about news in the community? You get to talk to people and find out what folks are doing?
Yeah, I have noticed that this school is very much a family. A lot of people come over here and talk to everybody, so it's really nice.
They say that barbers and bartenders are therapists.
That could be somewhat kind of true. You don't even realize it at the moment because you're just in the conversation with them and stuff, but you can tell they really appreciate the like leaving the chair and the conversation we shared with them. So
that's great.
So
that's great.
It's fulfilling. It's definitely a fulfilling job.
Good. So when do you graduate?
In April.
In April?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to have to make a trip up to Santa Fe and find you when you open up, huh?
Of course.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
All right, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Esperanza, remember her. All right.
Thank you very much.
We're talking with Pat Jenkins, the owner and the director here at ADU Barber School. Is that correct, Pat?
Yes, sir.
All right, and thank you, and welcome to That Saturday Show. Pat, you've been doing this work now for quite a while.
A little over 30 years.
A little over 30 years. That's quite a while, right?
Yes, sir.
And you've been in this particular location now for about 4 years.
Going on 4 years.
And seen quite a flow of students come through here. Just before we started, we were talking, about whether to take our mask off or not, and it put me in mind of, historical facts about barbers, as once upon a time being the source of primary health care in a lot of places. You go to the barber in order to get your health care needs met as well. That was beyond doctors and beyond hospitals. I just wanted to commend you on is that historically, as someone who's got a barber school, you're standing on the shoulders of quite a few people who've achieved quite a bit. 1934 was the first black barber school in this country that was responsible for training 80% of the black barbers here. Because before then, you didn't have to have a license, you didn't have training. But other folks decided that black barbers were becoming too competitive, and all of a sudden they said you got to have training, you got to have a license. So you're standing in some good tradition by continuing that important thing. So tell me, what motivated you to open a school?
At the time, I had a barbershop. I opened my first barbershop in 1992. And I was helping so many young barbers that came to the barber school that wasn't really prepared. And I was just talking. I said, well, I'm doing all the helping these guys. I might as well just open up a school and get paid.
And teach them how to do it right.
And it was birthed from that.
That's great. That's great. So, not to put you on the spot, but do you have an estimate about how many people you have trained over the years?
Pretty close to almost 500 people in the last 14 years.
Wow.
I had over 100 barbers working in Africa.
I was going to say, how many of them went on to keep going?
And then we have at least 38 that have their own business.
Wow. Wow. You need to be recognized for that, because you're feeding the business community here by putting people to work out here, and that's something that's so important. It really is. So, what are some of your greatest successes that you can point to?
Of course, starting out real young in the business world. When I started my first shop in 1992, that was a big accomplishment for me as a little country boy from Louisiana. And then, of course, having the opportunity to open the school was big for me. And because I wanted to have that type of impact,
right,
and leave that a legacy helping people and help develop people.
That's so important. That's really so important. Any plans for the future?
Oh yes, we in the building we're getting ready to add barber suites. We are in the process of remodeling, and my son, who's 22, is opening up his first shop upstairs.
Really?
Yes, I'm excited for him, and I'm excited for the opportunity to help even more people.
Wonderful. So people can come here and get trained.
Yes.
And if they've got the right motivation, they can open their own shop right here in this building to get started.
Yeah. We want, the vision is to have a better you be the hair mecca for Albuquerque, the state of New Mexico.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Anything else you want to share with us?
Well, just for the young people who really want to do this, go in this industry, any industry, it's just a matter of commitment, sacrifice, and hard work. And it's no difference. Sometimes it's harder preparing to keep money than trying to be in a situation where you don't have anything. And so I'm just excited after 30 years. This is my 30th year. I'm just excited to be in a situation where I can help, to be more of a contributor and help lives. And that's the impact I want to have.
Well, I honor you for that. I thank you for that. And congratulate you on 30 years of important service and how you touched the lives of so many young men and women, coming through here and going on to do bigger and better things. That's just because of the fact that they stopped here first.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Come and talk to me, I really wanna meet you, girl. I really wanna know your name. Oh, come and talk to me, I really wanna meet you, girl. I really wanna know your name. You look so sexy, you really turn me on, blow my mind every time I see your face, girl. Forever, forever, forever. I've been watching you for so very long, trying to get my nerve built up to be so strong. I really want to meet you, but I'm kind of scared, 'cause you're the kind of lady with so much class. Getting my thoughts together for the very next day, but when I see you, lady, I forget what to say. Your eyes and hair, such a beautiful tone. The way you dress and walk, it really turns me on. Come and talk to me, babe. I really want to meet you. Can I talk to you, babe? Take my money, my house and my car, for one beat of you. We can have it all, baby, babe. 'Cause making love every time we do, we'll be having time for love, and I'll be having time for you. And you know that I can't leave you alone. You got me feeling, and I'm feeling for you. I can't leave you alone. You got me feeling, oh, I'm feeling for you.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.